growing up in a dysfunctional home with generational trauma, generational addiction problems, generational abuse, generational, people who need mental health care, but they aren't getting it, or counseling, people who need parents who need help and counseling, and they're not getting any help. Growing up like that, I find that I'm still, things will come up and I'm still trying to process this stuff because it's never been processed. And part of the reason why it's never been processed is everybody in the family wanted to pretend that everything that went on was normal, or minimize everything or deny it happened, or just brush it off with saying, oh, well, all families have problems. And, when no one wants to talk, you can't process this stuff, right? Or you're trained to brush it aside or whatever. And one thing, when I was growing up, it's like our parents at home was only too glad to try to get rid of, the girls, and like any man that came along was like considered like a god, like the best thing that happened to them. And that's so wrong, like putting guys on a pedestal. You should be trying to protect your daughter. I would go to war. I would die trying to protect my daughter. I would do whatever it took to try to, protect my daughter. And, I wanted the best for her. And, when your son or daughter is dating, you don't want to you don't want them to get involved with bad people. You don't want them to hook up with someone with, a serious addiction issue going on, or, someone abusive or narcissistic or mean, or, serious mental health issues that you can spot, that you can detect, and it just blows my mind how a parent could not have discernment like that. And I see some of that passed on to the next generation in one of my siblings. And when my kids started seeing somebody, they're like, and they hadn't even met the guy. It's this blind assumption that this is the best thing that ever happened to my kid. And why would you, that thinking is so broken and dysfunctional. Why would you think anybody is a good person if you've never met them? Why would you assume that anything? You shouldn't be assuming someone's an alcoholic or mentally ill when you haven't met them. Or you shouldn't be assuming that they're the best thing since sliced bread when you haven't met them. You shouldn't be assuming good or bad. Why would you be assuming over the top that this is the best thing that's ever happened to my daughter when you've never seen or met the person? When, maybe they're an alcoholic, maybe they're an abuser, maybe they have, a past history of abusing former girlfriends. That's just such, if you have daughters and you think that, you roll out this red carpet for any young man that your daughter brings home, there's something wrong with you to just assume that someone's way better than your daughter and is the best thing that ever happened to your kid. Like, you should be screening people. You should be, politely and politely observing and listening to their words and watching their behavior and, be polite and hospitable. But, you should be trying to see if this person is good enough for your daughter or your son. And gosh, the things I experience at home. But what blows my mind too is, as adults, I can't believe, and I'm sure this is not unique at all, I'm shocked that my siblings will deny all sorts of things that happened. And I think maybe it's just too painful for them, or, like, I thought you're supposed to be able to talk to your siblings and help process it all together, rather than all of a sudden your siblings are your enemy and deny it. When you need to talk, everybody shuts down and none of it's true. It's so dysfunctional. I'm sick of dysfunction, Like, I would go to war. I would put my life on the line to protect my daughter from, men or anybody out there in the world. And for, to us to be regarded like everybody out there is better than us, better than your own children, gosh, I'm not young anymore, and it's amazing. We're still processing stuff even when we're older. We're still realizing I'm realizing how bad things really were. And probably because everybody always minimized everything. And, when you're gaslighting someone and minimizing everything and telling them it didn't happen or it wasn't that bad, you're literally trying to alter someone's reality. And people can alter your perception of things for the better or the worst. And it's wrong. It's manipulation, right? But yeah, devaluing your own children. Why? Because you think everybody else's children are better? Or you think other people raised their children well and you didn't? Even when I was a kid, I could see, you could say, oh, that was a long time ago. That was a different time. When, if a family had a bunch of kids, if a family had, 10 kids, back in the old days, you wanted to marry your daughters off. You wanted less mouths to feed. That's a fact. But you can say, oh, that was a long time ago. But also, I knew, there were parents, people my age, their parents were protecting them from the world out there. Their parents were trying to protect them from boys and men and predators, and trying to make sure that their daughters weren't hooking up or marrying somebody bad, right? It doesn't matter. Even, 100 years ago, there were parents who valued their children and were concerned about who they were going to have children with or live with, right?